Hello, everybody, and welcome to Narrative. At 9:58 a.m. on December the 9th, in an Altoona, Pennsylvania McDonald's of all places, the manhunt for America's most wanted CEO killer came to an end. Luigi Mangione, the 26-year-old tech worker accused of assassinating United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, was taken into custody, carrying both a forged ID and damning evidence of his alleged crime.
The writings also include a line that says, "I do apologize for any strife or traumas, but it had to be done," the official said. Now, more background on the suspect's past emerging. His family carving both financial and political footprints in Baltimore, where they own 2 country clubs. And his cousin Nino Mangione is a Republican state legislator. The University of Pennsylvania confirming he earned a bachelor's degree and a master's in engineering. Investigators say they're doing a complete scrub of Mangione's online posts, including Goodreads, where he quoted this take of the Unabomber: "When all other forms of communication fail, violence is necessary to survive." Mangione calling it interesting. His last known address was in Honolulu. A friend from Hawaii told CNN Mangione struggled with back pain.
He confirmed that he had surgery, and he sent me the x-rays. It looked heinous.
Along with a sophisticated weapon, a spiral notebook containing detailed notes of how the assassination was planned, and another note to the police, a manifesto of sorts, 262 words long. It begins, "To the feds, I'll keep this short because I do respect what you do for our country. To save you a lengthy investigation, I state plainly that I wasn't working with anyone." This was fairly trivial, he goes on to say, some elementary social engineering, basic CAD, and a lot of patience. We'll show you more of that manifesto throughout our report this evening. Court documents reveal Mangione was found with a semi-automatic pistol featuring a 3D printed receiver and a homemade silencer. That's the same type of weapon used in Thompson's execution-style killing outside the Manhattan Hilton Hotel 5 days earlier. The indictment paints a chilling picture of premeditation, but there are new questions tonight about where Mangione was just before returning to the United States. What was he doing in Japan? And why did his mother file a missing persons report on the 18th of November? As Mangione was led in for arraignment in Pennsylvania, he shouted out to the journalists,
"That's completely out of touch and an insult to the intelligence of the American people and lived experience."
If you couldn't make out what Mangione said there, what he said was, "This is completely unjust and an insult to the intelligence of the American people." He was then slammed against that brick wall by officers. It's all in stark contrast to the speech Mangione delivered as valedictorian of the class of 2016 at the prestigious old boys school Gilman in Pennsylvania.
All of these endeavors took a huge amount of courage. They demonstrate that the class of 2016 truly has the fearlessness to explore new things and the obvious ability to excel. I think this combination of preservation and exploration is what Gilman is all about.
In his speech, he was already grappling with an existential crisis. It was 2016, and the propaganda machine that gave us Donald Trump and MAGA had already begun to permeate the young minds of Americans. Throughout his years at Penn State and his time as a tutor at Stanford, he was described as a very smart person and immediately got a job after graduating in Santa Barbara, although he was later laid off. In 2022, Mangione joined an intentional community for digital workers in Honolulu. His friend, RJ Martin, said this about him.
Had a great sense of humor. We bonded over working out, over the intellectual conversations we had at book club. He was absolutely a kind person, not violent, never one to even watch violent sports or talk about guns even, never once popped up in conversation. It's beyond surprising that the Luigi that I knew is completely incompatible with an assassin.
But then everything changed. A surfing accident led to a week of immobilization for Mangione. His friends searched for a special bed, and he underwent back surgery that would change everything. Captured in the x-ray that he later used as his Twitter profile picture, which showed 4 screws in his lower spine. But we know very little about the surgery, and we certainly don't know if United Healthcare was his insurer. What is clear is that the back surgery had a profound impact on him. In the months leading up to the shooting, Mangione became immersed in a very specific corner of tech culture ideology, as embodied by Silicon Valley billionaire Peter Thiel. He shared Thiel's controversial views on neurodivergent tech founders
And I think there's this very strange phenomenon in Silicon Valley where a lot of the most talented startups seem to be run by people who are suffering from a mild form of Asperger's. And I think we need to always turn this fact around and view this as an indictment of our whole society. Because what does it say about our society when anyone who does not suffer from Asperger's, who is socially well adapted, will be talked out of all of their original creative ideas before they're even fully formed, who will sense this is a little bit too weird, that's a little bit strange, that sounds a little bit crazy, people are looking at me in a weird way. And I think this is something that we must all realize is a deeply endemic problem. They've done these studies at Harvard Business School, which I think you don't often think of the business school student as a profile in anti-Asperger's. They're very extroverted, often have no real convictions. And you have sort of a hothouse environment in which you put all these people for 2 years. And at the end of the 2-year process, they've all talked to each other and they've concluded they should all try to catch the last wave. And it's invariably a pretty bad idea. And in 1989, they all wanted to work for Michael Milken just a year or two before he went to jail. They were never interested in tech or Silicon Valley except for 99, 2000 when they timed the dot-com bubble implosion perfectly. And then 2005 to 07, it was all housing and private equity and things like that.
But this wasn't just hero worship or Thiel worship, as the internet likes to call it. Mangione critically engaged with Thiel's ideas, especially regarding tech disruption and libertarian politics. And it wasn't just Peter Thiel. His online engagement included early interest in Joe Rogan's tech and wellness content, a growing fascination with Jordan Peterson's critique of modern society, and even Tucker Carlson's anti-woke messaging. Here's his friend RJ again, talking about the conversations they would have.
The counterculture that America had in the 1960s made it really clear that we're on a course of action that's destroying the planet for the present gain, for future loss. And I think that conversation and that data and that information has only become more clear and more loud as time goes on. So those would be things we talk about, or perhaps how governmental institutions are failing our citizens, whether it is education or healthcare or wars that we wage. These are intellectual conversations that I enjoyed having, whether it was over a meal or at the park during sunset.
The transformation from Ivy League computer programmer into cold-blooded murderer accelerated after Mangione's back surgery. In March, at around the same time he turned 26, Mangione cut off contact with his friends like RJ.
Or maybe March-ish when we had our last text communications. I followed up with him in the next 3 months in a row, just, hey, what's up, bro? And didn't hear back from him. Our friendship was such that I didn't assume anything. I didn't take it the wrong way.
But what's really interesting about the timeline of Luigi Mangione is what happens just before he returns to the United States, just before the murder of Brian Thompson. He had spent several months in Japan, and very little is known about what he did there, and his social footprint is very limited. We know that up until about mid-April 2024, he was still in Hawaii and he underwent his surgery. But on April 16, 2024, on Twitter, he made a casual post from Japan about time zones, and that is why we know he was in Japan. So this is the note. He basically just describes the time zone difference. It says he's available on most days. Then he talks about NPC behavior, which is another interesting sidebar to sort of Silicon Valley thinking about how humans become more and more like robots and act like robots to fit into society. Obviously something he rebelled against. But we also know he was in Japan because of this post from Obaro Juni, who is a Japanese social media user who shared this information via Twitter. I live in Japan and was having a fun meal with a friend at a restaurant in Tokyo that day. He came in by himself and we talked to him and treated him to a meal and drinks because we wanted him to enjoy Japan. And he has a photograph memorializing that event. Now, it's clear he was sitting at sort of a side table, wasn't quite sitting with the rest of the gang there. But at least he had some contact with other people in Japan. He wasn't just there alone. Although the key question remains, what was he doing in Japan for those 3 months? Who was he there with? Why was he in Japan? And was it possible that the manufactured weapon that he used for the killing, as well as the components, were put together in Japan? Because once he got to Atlanta and then on to New York, there's very little opportunity for him to build a weapon like that. He must have done that before leaving Japan. At the same time, people are wondering why he suddenly cut off ties with his family and friends. And why did he travel from Japan to Atlanta before arriving in New York? Was that just a convenient flight, or was there another reason? We don't know exactly what would have triggered the murder, but we do know that sometime between these social gatherings in Japan and his arrival in New York, Mangione underwent a transformation. We now have the note addressed to federal officials that he was arrested with. The manifesto is short, but it leaves little room for confusion. This was fairly trivial, some elementary social engineering, basic CAD, and a lot of patience. Then the motive is stated. The US is the number one most expensive healthcare system in the world, yet we rank roughly 42 in life expectancy. And of course, this is exactly the kind of content that Elon Musk has been tweeting about on Twitter or X. This from him just the day after the murder. He says, shouldn't the American people be getting their money's worth? And then it shows you this chart where it says the United States is the highest healthcare admin costs per capita compared to OECD countries. So clearly there is some sort of alignment between the thinking of this bro culture and the assassin who was deeply invested in Peter Thiel, Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, and perhaps even Elon Musk. Premium subscribers, stick around for some final thoughts about the untold political side of the United Healthcare murder. That is coming up. For the rest of you, thank you for joining us tonight on Narrative. And don't forget to subscribe to Narrative either as a free subscriber or to our premium product at narrative.org. That's NARATIV.org. We rely on you to continue our investigations.